Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining on our third week of the Advocacy program. Today, the topic of the session is Advocacy Tools and Digital Campaigns, and we're joined here by an expert, Daisy Mahmood, a British Kurdish campaigner and survivor advocate. Daisy's work focuses on ending harmful practices such as child marriage, honor-based abuse, and FGM. Following the honor killing of her sister, Banas, Daisy has become a powerful voice for legislative and societal change. As an ex-campaigner at women's rights organization, she played a central role in securing the legal ban on child marriage in England and Wales through the Marriage and Civil Partnership, Minimum Age Act 2022. Daisy uses digital advocacy to drive systematic change, merging lived experiences, grassroots mobilization, and policy influence. Her TED Talk, A Survivor's Plea to End Child Marriage, has reached millions globally. She regularly collaborates with NGOs, lawmakers, and international bodies, and is passionate about equipping young people with tools to advocate effectively for human rights. It is truly an honor and pleasure to have you here with us at Girls Human Rights Hub to share your insights and expertise on your amazing and very honorable fight that you're doing. For any questions that you might have, please do use the Q&A section below. And as always, we're going to follow a similar format. We're going to leave Daisy to have her presentation. She's going to have a new format introduced for us. And then on the end, we're going to go through the questions. The floor is yours. Welcome at this session. Thank you, Daisy.
Thank you so much for such a warm and a kind welcome. It's such a pleasure to be with you all today. I'm so excited to hopefully add to some of the knowledge that you will have picked up from the previous conversations and the workshops that you've been doing. I'm very excited to talk to you about advocacy, tools and digital campaigns, which for me have been so critical in everything that I've done and probably the most important thing. I'm just going to have my presentation up. Thank you so much. I'm actually not controlling it, so apologies for that. I'm not the best with tech. But just to begin, first of all, thank you for the very warm introduction. Essentially, I am a campaigner who has gotten into this field, this work, simply because of my own experiences and being a Kurdish woman growing up in Iraq, growing up in Iran. I have seen a lot of the gender forms of violence that women and girls around me have experienced. And so that is what has led me here today. On the first page that you see is actually two campaigns that I was very involved in. The first one at the top was around female genital mutilation. I know some of you have covered that recently. So I did a campaign with the London Mayor, and that was one of the posters. I was very passionate about talking about my culture, being a Kurdish woman, and how important it is for me to celebrate my culture, but also to talk about things that are not beneficial to any of us, are actually very, very harmful. And the second photo at the bottom is a Guardian article of a few years ago when I worked on the legal age of marriage in England and Wales. So to get us started, I would love to do a little question just to warm us up and get some of your thoughts. Now, I'm going to do a few of these in my talk, and there is absolutely no right or wrong answer. So I just want to put that out there. You just put in the chat whatever comes to the top of your mind, and then we'll discuss. So if I can have the next page, please. Okay, so I want to know, again, there's no right or wrong answers. If you were to take a guess, what would you say is currently the legal age of marriage in England and Wales? And that's for both boys and girls. So feel free to put your answers in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, however you feel most comfortable. I think we have a chat function, don't we? We do.
Okay. You should be able
Yes.
to see, there is Isha says 16 with parental consent. It's 18 or 21. Basically, you should also be able to see on the below if you...
Yes, I can see those answers now. So most people are actually saying 18. We've got a few 16 with parental consent. Thank you all so much for, someone else has said 18. Thank you all so much for your answers. The reason I asked that is because the recent change in the law is actually very, very recent. It only changed in 2022, and the correct answer is actually 18 with absolutely no exceptions. So previously, the legal age of marriage was 16 with parental consent. However, the campaign that I led actually changed that legal age from 16 to 18 with absolutely no exceptions. And that is all forms of marriages. So we're talking about religious marriages, customary and traditional, and registry office. But that's a really good way for us to kind of get thinking about whether or not this is something that some of you have come across or some of you are aware of or having conversations around. Thank you so much for your input. If we can go on to the next slide, please, and we can dive into digital advocacy and talking a little bit about what that looks like in comparison to general advocacy. Now, for me, when I started working in this area, just to give you a bit of background why this campaign really spoke to me to change the legal age of marriage. Previously to actually working in this space, I used to have a very different career. So I used to work in fashion. And when I was 16 years old, I was actually forced into a marriage with a stranger, and that was set up by my parents. So I was actually able to leave that marriage about 2 years after. And this is what brought me to this space, my personal experiences that have shaped the person that I am. When I was around 25, I thought a lot about my experiences and how I can use those experiences perhaps to raise awareness and talk about what I have faced. And that's really how I fell into digital advocacy. So, this is around the time, I'm sure you will all remember COVID not that long ago. Um, Around COVID, I actually decided to reach out to an organization and to talk to them about my experiences. And that's really where I first came across digital advocacy. And just really quickly to define that, when we say digital advocacy, we're talking about the use of online platforms and digital tools, for example, messaging apps, websites, videos, and social media, solely to influence change, raise awareness, and shift norms. And most importantly, put pressure on decision makers. This has actually been, for me, absolutely crucial in reaching not just decision makers, but also storytelling, talking about the impact that child marriage has had on my life and reaching people all over the world. I think, in terms of advocacy, it is the best free tool that you can have in your hands because it really does mean that you can reach anyone, anywhere in the world. And it means that you can stand up for so many issues. It doesn't have to be one particular issue. You can literally be in your bedroom, in the car, on a bus, and you can raise awareness about an issue that is really, really important to you. So, I just want to also go back to the chat, if we can use that again. Just thinking, maybe in the last week, 2 weeks, has anyone who's on the call today learned something about, let's say, a human rights issue, from whether it was TikTok, Instagram, anywhere else, that for you has kind of like grabbed your attention? So let's just say in the last week, because we all do go online, we're all somewhat chronically online and learning about issues. But is there anything that you've picked up, any human rights issues in the past week that has grabbed your attention? That's kind of maybe stuck with you, and that you wanted to learn more about. So feel free to use the Q&A section. We can have a little bit of a discussion. So the reason I'm asking that is because, for me, the power of digital advocacy really puts life-saving information into our hands. We don't really have to do anything, but simply being on our phones, we can actually see very powerful digital content that is being amplified to us. Thank you so much for the person who wrote in the chat, Isha. The starvation of people in Gaza. Absolutely. This is an issue that I think many of us are getting updates through digital media, digital advocacy. And it's really important because we do want to keep up to date with what's happening. So that's absolutely right. And I think for me, the best thing about digital advocacy is that you can have information from rural parts of the world. You can hear stories from survivors, people who can tell their truth and reach the world. And a lot of us are able to actually move to action. We're able to do something about these issues. We're able to lend our voices because of what we're seeing online. And I've just seen someone saying that they've learned about FGM in the Scholars Program yesterday. Thank you also. FGM is a really great example of learning about human rights issues through digital advocacy because it's such a sensitive topic. Sometimes I think just having that information through your phone or through whatever it is, TikTok, Instagram, it actually is a lot easier to digest. The use of rape as a weapon of war in Tigray, again, a very, very important and urgent topic that I think, had it not been for us being able to receive news this way, most of us probably wouldn't know about that. Traditionally speaking, you would have to buy a newspaper or watch the news. So I think now we really have that power to actually go on our phones and see what's happening in the world. One example that I did want to tell you about and talk about is the Me Too movement. So hashtag Me Too. And that is such an important movement for me because it actually started with a tweet and it became global. And that's something that people all over the world, particularly women, actually shared their stories about. So I just want you to kind of think, as we're having this conversation, about whether you've ever reposted or shared something that actually moved you. And that in itself, that act is actually an act of advocacy. So if you've seen something about FGM, you've seen something about Gaza, you sharing that is you actually advocating on digital platforms. Um, and I think just to say, in terms of sharing on platforms, it's not necessarily always about going viral, but it's also about being strategic and picking the right message and the right platform for the right audience. So there is a little bit of a recipe that goes into it, which we'll go into a little bit more. Um, so I know some of you have given examples of what you've seen, that some content that you've picked up. For you or for any of you, are there any digital platforms that are the most powerful ones for fighting human rights violations? Like, would you say there are any that just speak to you a lot better than any others do? For example, is it YouTube over TikTok, or is it TikTok over Instagram Reels? Are there any for anyone attending today that is kind of like, this is my go-to place to learn about human rights violations, and sources there. So just having a little think about where you go. For me personally, I would say it's definitely TikTok. TikTok is such a great place to digest stories, lived experience, also news, things that are happening, sometimes in the form of, I guess, like viral music, etc. It's a really good way to just kind of pick up on what's happening out there. I would like to go on to the next slide, if possible, please. Thank you so much. Before I go onto this slide, I'm just going to read something that Isha has posted. She says, I use a range from TikTok to Instagram because I know that I can actually get fact-based evidence. That's a really good point, Isha. I think sometimes with digital media, what we need to be very conscious of is misinformation can be spread very easily and very, very quickly. For example, in the case of the riots that were happening in London last year, when there was an incident, a very tragic incident in Southport, that actually was something that went very quickly. Misinformation spread so quickly on Twitter, which is now known as X. So it's been very mindful where we do get information from, but definitely TikTok and Instagram are amazing for keeping up with what's happening. Isha also said, I rely on source. If I rely on sources like the BBC, we may never know if they post a one-sided view. Yes, absolutely, Isha. Again, it's really good to be mindful of biases. So one platform might also choose a side and kind of share that part of the story. So it's really good to kind of get a full perspective of what's happening, especially the people who are living and experiencing those issues. Zoe has also said Instagram to pick up on what's happening, and then YouTube if I want to gain more information around the topic. I love that, Zoe, because you've kind of basically clarified that Instagram is where we get the shorter format content, and it's like, something we've got a few minutes for, and then you really want to dive into that topic and you go on YouTube. I do the same actually. I'm very much into going onto YouTube once I've learned about something on TikTok or Instagram and kind of diving in a little bit more, maybe hearing from different people sharing their experiences. Thank you again so much for your input. It's so good for us to be able to kind of have that dialogue and talk a little bit more about where we're going for information and how we're using digital tools. So on this page here, I wanted to share with you a little bit of content. And I'm more than happy to share the links to this once we've come off the call, because I can share my PowerPoint with the team. When I first started campaigning and using digital advocacy as a tool, I just want to be really transparent. I honestly felt really worried and insecure about talking to my phone, essentially just having a phone and just talking to it, being vulnerable. I felt like I was a bit cringy and a little bit embarrassing. But actually, I really quickly realized just how important it was to people who wanted to learn, to people who wanted to connect with issues that they've never heard about. And it almost became my go-to way of communicating with my online community. Um, the first video that you see is actually a video that I did around child marriage when the government had said that they will commit to changing the legal age of marriage. And that was around the time I definitely felt massively insecure about talking to the camera. And I would sometimes watch the footage back and think, oh, does this sound right? Will people connect to this? But one of my colleagues, she gave me this tip and she said, just post it, because the more you watch your content back, the more you kind of worry about it and think, do I sound silly? Shall I change this? Should I do this better? Then the more you'll just delay yourself and look for excuses and procrastinate. So I got to this point where we just film, edit it, and just post it straight away. And then the more I did that, actually, the more comfortable I became in just talking to my phone, talking to the camera. The video in the middle is one that I did having literally no expectations for this video to do as well as it did, to go as viral as it did. I decided to launch my own independent campaign around baby formula. So I realized that baby formula prices were getting higher and higher each year. And I would see news articles about mothers, especially, who were struggling so much to feed their babies and who had to sometimes steal baby formula. This was the extent of the issue, and I felt really sad and I really wanted to do something about it. So I did this video just talking to my phone and saying, maybe we should start a fundraiser. Let's see how people can afford baby formula. And I launched a fundraiser. This tool for me was the first time I was using it. It's a free platform. And I launched a fundraiser. Within 5 days, there was £10,000 raised. And this is the video that kickstarted that entire movement. In my mind, I thought I'd raise something around £250, £300 and be able to help some families. But £10,000 was raised in just 5 days. And I was able to use my Instagram to connect with families all over the country and order them baby formula straight to their house. And they didn't have to do anything. All they had to do was tell me what formula they need and the address, and I would send that to them straight away without any questions. So it was an incredible campaign, and it gave me so much confidence in using videos to get to people, to reach people. And the final video which is the one of me wearing the red dress, is a video I did not so long ago that was around the topic of decriminalization of abortion, which happened very recently. So I was involved in this campaign because I was lobbying MPs in order to remove the subject of abortion from the courts and ensure that this was a health issue that was dealt with, and that women were given support, women were given resources in order to be able to navigate this very difficult journey. And once again, in this particular video, I shared my own personal story of being pregnant at the age of 16. And I talked about how being pregnant, being 16, and being in a forced marriage was extremely difficult for me, and abortion was my only lifeline. So, one of the, I would say, key themes in all of the content that I share is that I share my own lived experience and I talk about how the issue affects me. And I think you will probably, those of you who've maybe answered in the chat, you'll probably relate to the fact that when you watch a video and someone is talking about their own experience, there's something that, especially if you relate to the topic, there's something that just keeps you on that video and keeps you wanting to do something, to take some kind of action from the video. So just wanted to say that if there's an issue that you care about, that you want to use your platform for, you really don't have to have tons of followers. You don't have to be famous, have lots of money. You don't have to be a traditional content creator. You can literally pick up your phone and start talking to your phone about whatever it is that you are passionate about. And most importantly, even if you reach one person, your video has already been successful. That's the way I always think of it, is that if I reach even just one person, I'm already very, very happy and I'm content with what I've shared. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. So talking a little bit more about advocacy tools, I have made a bit of a list and I want you to think of this as like an essentials toolkit. Um, for me, storytelling was a really big part of my advocacy, especially having lived experience. So that's something that I always drove my advocacy through, was sharing my experiences, talking about how this has affected me, and allowing people to really connect with that vulnerable side of the person that is sharing that content. So I said in the previous slide that you really don't need like the best smartphone. You don't need a microphone. You don't need a tripod. All you really need is your phone and internet access and just your voice, just passion to want to do something. So the essentials toolkit that I've put together, at the end, I'll actually share with you a bit of a table that you can either take a picture of or have from the PowerPoint. But in terms of a toolkit, the most important thing, especially if it's something that affects you personally, is finding a way to storytell, telling your experience in a way that people can follow, people can connect to, and that you can reach their hearts and their minds. Another thing that is really impactful is petitions. I don't know if any of you have ever used petitions or want to use petitions to get some kind of change made happen. But when I was doing my campaign around child marriage, I actually made a petition on change.org and Freedom United. So my petition was hosted on two platforms in order to get as many signatures as possible. And this petition actually received 250,000 signatures. And the most incredible part of this was during lockdown. So we were very nervous about how many signatures we would get because we thought that this is the time when people wouldn't necessarily be doing things like that and they may just be very busy and anxious about what was on the news. But incredibly, we managed to get 250,000 signatures. And this is a tool I want you to bear in mind when it comes to wanting any kind of change, especially a human rights issue. Think about that as a resource where you can literally have hundreds of people joining you by just putting their signature, and it's very powerful. I do believe it's a 10,000 signatures, which gets your petition mentioned or have to discuss in Parliament. So it holds a lot of power if you use it correctly. And again, in terms of the videos that I did on the previous slide, I actually used a lot of content creation to talk about the updates of my petition. So every time I'd get, let's say, 100K or 200K signatures, I would then make a video and say, this is where we're at, just updating our community. So you can also use your videos as a tool to update people, to keep them in the loop, and to share really important updates. The third thing that I've put is the hashtags. Again, especially if you're working in a humanitarian niche topic, hashtags are so important because you can find your community. So I know that FGM was mentioned here as one of the workshops that was done in the scholars program. However, these are hashtags that can really help you to look for more people who are talking about this and get them to find you and amplify your voice, amplify your campaign. So if you're starting a social media campaign or advocacy campaign, do look for hashtags and see what's already out there, and think of ones that are quite unique, that can be easy to remember, that people can just click on and find your content. In terms of a visual media, what I'm talking about there is Reels, essentially Reels or TikToks, which are, I think, now probably one of the best ways to digest information, to get advocacy, digital advocacy through your phone. So think about using short clips, whether they are clips that start with, did you know X, Y, and Z? They have always worked very, very well for me. So let's say you're doing something around FGM. You can just do one around facts of FGM. You can do one about the history of FGM. You can do one about the impacts of FGM, and they can be very short and snappy and informative. Canva is a great one. I don't know if any of you have ever used Canva, but in terms of infographics and using information to share with your audience, Canva is such a great tool. Even the free version, there are so many templates that you can choose from, and they're very eye-catching. They're very good for having people just learn very easily about what your campaign is about and support you very quickly. I also wrote on this PowerPoint micro and educational content. So I'm not necessarily talking about content that is a bit like memes, but I'm also talking about content that is very niche, but also short, snappy, and to the point. Sometimes sped up slightly, because I think for most of us, because we're receiving so much content online, sometimes you just need that short, snappy content that you take in, you learn something from, and you're very clear on, right, this is what I need to do. And then I've also wrote on there is digital mobilizing tools. Now that kind of falls in line with WhatsApp groups, virtual events, but also sometimes using, and I'm saying this with a lot of thought, but sometimes using what is perhaps a trending sound, what is perhaps like a meme-like approach to the content that you're producing, just to get that relatability. Sometimes when we're talking about very sensitive topics, it's important to talk about them in that way and to have respect for those topics. But there are also ways of making things that are sort of like Gen Z content, very relatable. I've seen a lot of people do that around FGM, and it's brilliant. It's so easy to digest. It's so snappy. It's so short, and it's very eye-catching. So that's around the advocacy tools. Please don't worry too much. Just if you feel passionate about a topic, get your phone out and start recording. That is literally what I did. So if I can have the next slide, please. I believe this is one that we already talked about. So that was a question around something that we learned in the last week. So we've already answered that question. Sorry, if you can move on to the next slide. I'll start talking and maybe it'll move. Um, so I want to talk to you a little bit about building a campaign. I know I gave the tools that I think are very important. I now want us to talk a little bit about some of the steps, because I know we're going to do an exercise in not too long, and I just want to talk a little bit about some of the steps that I took. And if I were to go back in time, I would probably do the exact same things. Um, Sorry, Ivana, is it possible to move to the next slide? I might raise my hand, she might see me. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to talk, and then when the slide changes, you'll see it all. Um, okay, here we go. Thank you so much. So some of the steps that for me, I think are absolutely crucial. There's a lot of things that you can do, but it's really, really important to be quite clear on exactly what you want to achieve. So, in terms of a goal, like one person could say, my goal is through my digital advocacy, I want to impact. Now, that is a very, very generalized statement. So, you zoom and think about a very clear goal. So, to give you an example, for me, I knew that obviously the age of marriage in the UK was 16 and it should be much higher. So my clear goal was, at first, actually, it started with, I want to ban child marriage. But then the closer we got and the more we talked about it, the goal became clearer to, we need to ban all forms of child marriage under the age of 18 in England and Wales. So it's really setting that clear goal. And you can do this as many times as you need to get down to the line that just speaks to you, speaks to anybody. And you can test that on people that you know. Is this clear enough? Does this say what I want to achieve? This is my end goal. Is this clear? Knowing your target audience. Now, this again is so important because you could say, well, I want everybody to be aware of this. So, how do you start that? If you want everybody to be aware of this, not everybody is on social media, not everybody attends online events, not everybody is on Facebook, not everybody is on this platform. So, it's really thinking about how do you get to all the people that you want to get to. In my experience, for example, I did a lot of traditional media. So I went on the news quite a lot. I did, for example, the BBC, I did ITV, I would do articles with The Guardian, then I would do like smaller blogs, and then I would use social media, then I would do a petition, and then I would do a newsletter. So it's making sure that you get to your different audiences in different ways because you need to get to know who they are. If parents are your number one audience, how will you get to parents? How will you communicate with them? What's your method of communication? Is it going to be on TikTok? Is it going to be on Instagram? Where are parents receiving their information? Or is it best to do a leaflet and hand them out outside of school? So, having that clear path of where you're getting your information to your audience is really, really important. Um, and then I wrote craft your message. So, whenever you're doing something digitally, it's very important to have three things in terms of the message. So you need your hook. Your hook is what gets people to say, ah, what's this? What's this topic? For example, the first time you might have heard about FGM, it might be something that you've heard in the past, but seeing somebody talk about it in the scholars program yesterday, maybe with a diagram, that's the hook, that's got you in. And then there's the story. Maybe someone sharing about how it happened to them, when it happened to them, and the impact that it's had. And then at the end of that, you have your ask. So the ask could be, help me push for a legal help me push for a legal ban on FGM, for example, in Nigeria, for example, in the UK. It is currently illegal in the UK, so it has been illegal for a long time. But having the ask at the end of your digital advocacy is so important, because what you don't want to do is have this huge grand campaign on, let's say, FGM, and you've got the hook, you've got the personal story, but at the end, the audience has nothing to do. So I've watched your content, you've talked about how it's impacted you, I've learned something, but what do you want me to do now? That needs to be really, really clear to your audience, even if the ask is share this video. That was my probably number one ask. Even now, when I do a video, I always say, please share and like this video. Please spread it wide and far so that your colleagues, your friends, your family members can learn about this and we can just get the word out. Or I might say, head over to my bio and sign the petition. Or I might say, I have a fundraiser in my bio, please donate to the fundraiser. So it's just being clear, what do you want your audience to do? Are they signing something? Are they sharing your content? Are they putting their signature somewhere? Or are they writing to their MP? And writing all those things out, you can do those tasks at a different time. You can start your campaign and say, actually, all I want from now is I want people to like my story or like my post and share it. And then a few weeks later, you might say, actually, what I want now is everyone to put their email address on this newsletter. And then that might change to, I want everyone to write to their MP. So it's thinking ahead, what are the different things you want people to do to support your cause? And they can be small, medium, or big tasks. They don't have any right or wrong in that sense. It can just be whatever is right in the next steps for your digital campaign. And then the final thing is launching your campaign, but sustaining the feedback and the communication loops with your audience. Something that takes a lot of time. I'm saying this from experience, from having run quite a few digital campaigns. Something that takes so much time is replying to comments, talk to your conversation, ongoing communication with them. But you do have to do it, because if people are taking their time, giving you their time, and they are, hooked to your story and they're hooked to your campaign, and they give that energy, but they don't receive anything back, it almost feels like they're talking to nobody on the other side of the screen, and the person who's launched this massive campaign isn't communicating with them. So it's liking their comments, saying the thank you, receiving their DMs, saying thank you, appreciating the support. Even doing a video, sometimes if you get a lot of messages, the best thing to do is do a video and say, I've had a lot of support on this, lots of feedback, and I just want to say thank you to everyone, because you might not have the time to go through every single DM or every single comment that's been left on your page. So just keep a good relationship with your audience. And there are people who supported me, I would say 4 or 5 years ago, that I'm still in regular contact with, that still support everything that I do. And they're people I've never met. They're just people on social media. And it's amazing the level of support you can have from building that community. So work on that and give your time and energy to your community, because they will be your supporters. Even 5 people are incredible to have as allies and as your community. If we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, I now want to talk to you about the ethics of digital advocacy, particularly talking about issues that are sensitive and that are impacting marginalized women. And the reason I want to talk about that is because I'm somebody who's from a marginalized community, and the issues that I speak about have very often been, for example, by the media or by the general public, received in a way that does not help my cause. A lot of the time, our experiences are shaped by the way my gender, for example, with my race, my class, and other factors intersect. And that's really important to keep in mind when we're having conversations around sensitive topics that impact marginalized communities. I've written I've shared with you an article that I did for The Guardian, and this was in 2002. So it was just when MPs had voted to end the loophole around child marriage, and it was very close for the legal change happening. It was a very exciting time. So I did this article and I shared very vulnerably my experiences, but unfortunately, the title that was chosen for the article was the one that you can see. And it's about me sharing how my perpetrator, my ex-husband that I was forced to marry, was losing his hair. This is the quote that was used. And I don't know what your thoughts are. I would love to hear if anybody has any thoughts in the comments. But for me personally, on such an important topic, this particular line is not doing this topic any justice in terms of how important it is to change the legal age of marriage, how important it is to protect children, to protect women and girls. Instead, the focus has been on a quote that I shared, which was in reference to how my ex husband was a lot older than me. So I speak a lot about how the media actually speaks about underrepresented stories, underrepresented communities, and I'm very passionate about challenging the language that is used. And I think we have to do that because if we don't, then things are framed. And I know Isha mentioned about the BBC, but things are framed in a very particular tone and in a very particular way. And that kind of just feeds into biases that people might have already, into cultural relativism and cultural sensitivities, but the lack of those things. So it's very important to challenge those things as of when we see them. So for me, when I talk to media, when I share content, it's always about trying to make sure that my audience is not re-traumatized because, as I said in the very beginning, the topics that a lot of women like myself, women who've experienced violence or abuse, the topics that we talk about are very personal, and they come with a lot of pain and trauma. And although we want to share those stories, we want to be mindful that we are not re traumatizing anybody. So I'm talking to you guys today about my campaigning and what has, shaped my campaigning. But it wouldn't be right for me to just come on the call and start telling you, without any trigger warnings, some of the most graphic content around my experiences, because that would then mean that you guys are re traumatized and it's hard for you to take information in and to be moved to do something when you're re-traumatized. So if you are going to share content around sensitive topics, think about the language that you're using and think about how you want to relay those important messages and how you want to share your lived experience in a way that not only doesn't re-traumatize yourself, but also your audience. And thinking about the consent and the protection of victims or survivors. When I was working on the campaign of child marriage, I also connected with a lot of survivors who, from around the world, had experienced child marriage and who were sharing their own stories. And it was very important to respect their privacy, respect their identities, and only share what was comfortable for them. So if you do end up working on something where other survivors get in touch with you, where they share their stories, it's about meaningfully engaging them and talking to them about how they are most comfortable. Because for one person, like myself, I might be comfortable sharing my experiences on a TED talk or on the media. For another person, that is not what they've chosen. And it's just bearing that in mind and respecting that at all times. Um, so I just want to go into a question, if that's okay. Oh, oh God. I am stuck on a screen. Sorry. Sorry, next slide. This has appeared 3 times now. Next slide, yeah. So before we go into the campaign and the kind of activity, I wanted you all to think about a campaign, particularly a digital campaign that you might have seen that you felt personally connected to, where there was a connection, and whether you felt like that emotionally moved you because of the way that this conversation was handled. Or on the flip side, have you seen something recently that for you was perhaps a little bit traumatizing, and that you felt like this isn't information that I can take in? So just trying to think whether you've had the good or the bad example of either, on any platform that you might have seen, any digital campaigns, that you've thought, well, I connect to this because of a personal reason, or this is a little bit too much for me, so I'm disconnecting from that. Because I just want us to think a little bit about the different examples that we might have come across that we can also use as inspiration when we're making our campaign. We'll always come back to it another time. On the next slide, I want us to, if we have the time, to do a little bit of an activity. I'm not sure if you've done these in the previous calls. However, I want us to get into I think my slides have moved forward. Sorry, previous one, please. Thank you. I want us to think about a campaign that we can build, and I've just put a week, so it's just a 1 week digital campaign, and aiming it at ending a human rights violation. Now, I've written that. However, this is completely optional, and it can be a generalized topic, such as violence against women and girls, as a broad topic. And some of the things about is the campaign goal, what your hashtag might be, what your key messages or story might be, which platforms and tools that you'll use, and what would be your main visual or post idea. Now, remember, this is just a 1 week's digital campaign, and I'm pretty sure we're allowed to exchange if anybody has any questions or any thoughts. I think that you can interact, if I've understood correctly. So feel free to ask me anything, or to share. Are we doing this as a presentation? Oh, the question. Is this something that you did as a presentation in your previous seminars, or was this something you all did on your own and then shared? I'm wondering if we're allowed to go into a breakout, because that might help to be able to discuss the format. We shared our findings and our work for the second week. We sent our work out, but that was for a longer piece of work. Okay.
So I'm so sorry, like I'm having a bit of delay with your wording, and that's why it's a bit difficult to follow. But Paisley, so if we want to go into breakout room, what I can do, I can create an event, breakout room here. And I can do it safe. Are we returning back here? Because I think I can allow others to talk. If anyone wants to like speak about anything of the topic, I can allow to talk, but that just the video, it's not going to be on. Is that fine for anyone? So
I'm happy with that. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Then I can share again the screen. And is this the slide that you want to leave on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
whoever wants
please,
to
thank you.
speak, then just raise your hand, please, and I'll allow you to talk. And I think for those, so last week, sorry, we had a session with Laura Corriton, and I think for those that had submitted their campaign idea, I think we went through all the steps that she did as well. So I don't know if anyone who submitted that thing could like make a shift and answer the five key points, which I think are very, very similar on making a campaign.
Okay, if you've done something similar, what I also actually put on the, unless anybody wants to share, what I also put on my slide was on the next slide was actually reflecting and thinking, because if you've already done this exercise, the next part would have been to think a little bit about or discuss what you enjoyed about building the campaign, what challenges you faced, and what tools you felt were most powerful or least powerful, and how you feel like you can take your campaign forward, and what is the one thing that you feel you can do to advocate online, whether it's on a topic that you are passionate about. So I kind of did like the next step as well. But if you want us to move ahead, because actually I love Laura, I work very closely with her, she's great, and
Yeah.
I think there's quite a crossover in the work that we do. So I'm actually on their board as well on Sex Ed Matters. So I appreciate that there's definitely lots of like similarities and crossovers. So if you guys want to do this next step, if you feel like this might be better,
We have
then
Isha who she says she doesn't mind sharing her thoughts and she can maybe blend both of the slides. So share her campaign and then her reflection.
wonderful.
Okay, Isha, I'll
Okay, that's great.
give you the opportunity to like speak. Can you try now?
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, cool. Right. So I focused on last week, which kind of ties well into today. So how climate change, how the rising temperatures, because of climate change, causes a disparity in women in the global south. So it's kind of linked to, rising temperatures and how women and girls in the global south are affected by it more. So yeah, sorry, I'm just getting my slides up. So my campaign focused on how climate change is one of the most pressing issues of our time, and it threatens to reverse progress on human rights and sustainable developments, especially in third world countries. It also worsens gender inequality, and it poses risks to people's ways of life, their income, their health, and their safety, especially for women and girls around the world. So they're under critical condition. So the survival of these women are decreasing rapidly because of for securing food, water, and in a lot of these countries, women are kind of responsible for making the food, for bringing the water into the home. And with the rise in temperatures and how crops are failing, water wells drying out, women are needed to work a lot harder and travel further just to put food on their table. It also adds pressure on girls as well. So for daughters who, are in education that have to skip their education to help with the added pressure on at home. So you can see that those in the global south bear the brunt of environmental degradation, and most of them are displaced because of it. So I think that I found like a UN brief that finds that climate change is intensifying the social and economic stresses that are fueling increased levels of violence against women and girls. You especially find out that because people who rely a lot on crops and agriculture, and if their climate change is affecting their source of income, another source of income that they move to is using young girls as a way of getting dowry, so marrying them off to get dowry to get income into their household. And it's quite sad to think that, when we have temperatures rising and the next port of call is to get another source of income is to sell their daughters off just to get an income in. It's a shame that we have to resort to these measures. So the campaign basically fights for women and becomes a key advocate for change. By leading efforts for environmental justice and educating those with privilege about the impacts of climate change, we can move towards a world where a lot more people are more educated and more and can make a change about fighting for these girls' rights. Because a lot of people, we all know about climate change, but however, a lot less of us know about how this impacts women in the global south. So it's kind of a voice for those women whose voices have been stripped away from them, because climate justice is gender justice. So the reason why I chose this campaign is because so I'm the first generation, 1.5 generation immigrant in my family. So my dad is born in India whilst my mum was born here. So a lot of the time I get to see, and they live in quite rural villages. So a lot of the time I get to see how climate change has impacted them, and the hardship that they've had to overcome just to put food on the table, and to build houses. So on last year, the monsoon season was extremely detrimental to a lot of people in the villages because increased flooding because of the heat. Many houses were being flooded because the structure of the houses weren't that strong, so they were being flooded. Their source of income was being wiped away because of the crops being flooded as well. So it was hard to see that a lot of my family members were struggling first-handed from the impacts of climate change, but also how the women as well had to adapt to the hardships with carrying the burden of decreased limited food resources and water scarcity to feed the family. Um, so whilst our campaign focuses on combating climate justice, injustice towards women, I thought that, we needed to start small first. So building those little branches, as I think we got taught about last week, how we kind of had to go backwards in our way of like starting small and then taking olive branches and just building a wider kind of campaign. So I thought that our first small step would be to make sure that both schools, both primary and secondary, have a compulsory day each either week or month on the impacts of climate change, as well as how women and girls in the global south are at the forefront of this change and this impact. So by doing this, we're embedding this research, this kind of thought into young children and adults, creating a source of community as well as conversation as to new ideas on how to combat this, but to make people more aware of what is going on and how if we don't stop if we leave the rate of how climate change is going, well then women and girls will suffer at like an unprecedented rate in the global south. So it creates a system in which the youth can become inspired and encouraged to speak out and educate others on the matter. So we create a community passionate on fighting climate change. So I thought our decision makers would be both local governments and school districts, and going out with flyers to ensure that parents as well are on board with it, so that they can also bring it to the school board to create this room for conversation and try to persuade them to support and spread this idea to school council meetings. And then the bigger picture would be to go contact the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Environment on how we put this into the curriculum and to show them that the support is there, that people want this to happen. And the platforms that I would probably use would be to start having petitions first, to create support groups for this campaign, and allow for like-minded individuals to come together, as well as social media. So that was my research.
Thank you so much, Isha, for sharing that. It's really, really powerful. And I can see you've thought a lot about your objective and obviously who your target audience is, how the issue affects women and girls in the global south. I think it's a really, really powerful campaign. From listening to you, what I would think about is, so education seemed to be the thing that was the theme that was coming up a lot, whether it was in schools, and awareness. Um, would you consider, so in terms of the ask, I know you said you want people to be aware that it's happening. Is your ask mainly for people to know, or beyond that, what can, for example, you want young people to be educated, what can the ordinary person like myself do? So I think about like the petition. Ultimately, what's the petition goal? What will it, when people have signed it, what will be the outcome of that petition? Is it that the education is mandatory in schools? Is it that you would like, for example, councils and communities to have raising awareness days on this? What will be your dream outcome from this petition, and from the conversations that are being had? Because ultimately, of course, you will want the women in the global south where the climate change is hitting them the hardest, but they're also the women with the solution. So you would want them to actually be out of this difficult situation. And you talked about crops, you talked about dowry. So there's a lot of intersex, and there's a lot of issues that lead to violence being perpetuated towards women and girls. So I would say you have such a great idea. It's really, really powerful. Just dig a little bit deeper, and just fine tune really the ask, because I think your hook is there, the story's there. It makes perfect sense why you want to raise awareness about this, who it impacts, what the impact is, and how it really it was really powerful listening to you talking about your knowledge around it, that personal connection as well. You spoke about the family connection and how difficult it is for the women experiencing this firsthand. So really powerful. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for sharing, Isha. And we also have a question, Hazy, like we're also, as an organization, we're doing a campaign to make February Girls Human Rights Month. Now, we want to get your pick your brains on this, and so I think we might do this exercise as well. And basically, our main goal, and we have decided on the hashtag. We have decided on the key message and the platform and tools, and the main visuals. We're still working on somehow. And the idea was, so we have 11th of October, which is the International Day of the Girl Child, and we did celebrate last year and the year before. We did an awards show, and we awarded the change makers and those that had worked in girls' human rights on that time. And we were always on a discussion that we need more days. We need a specific, because it's also being a girl, you kind of get to firsthand touch upon all the violations and all the beginning of your struggle that goes to manifest as women's rights violations. So, and usually, like, there is this term that it's a double discrimination. You're a girl, you're a woman, so yeah. So it's always like that. This being a more vulnerable group, so you are twice affected. So how do you see this? Do we have a good ground, like a good tagline? And on the hashtag though, we are a bit stuck. So we are like, we wanted to be very, very direct, and now we're thinking make February Girls Human Rights Month, which is like a super long a super long hashtag. But yeah, this is something that we're doing right now, and this February is the first month that the first time that we're like focusing completely. We did mention it last February when we did the Girls Human Rights Festival, but this time we're all in on our campaign.
Wow. I'm just gonna respond back to you, and then there's two questions in the Q&A. But this is an incredible, I think, initiative. So very, very amazing to hear. I will definitely agree that there are, I think, not enough days for women and girls, particularly for girls. As you said, we have the Day of the Girl Child, and I think having a day that is specifically just for girls is very, very important. I think you have a lot of, in terms of the need for the campaign, I think you will have a lot of support. I can't imagine that it's something that will not get, global support. In terms of the hashtag, I think it is a little bit long, but something that just came to me because you said it's February, and I don't know if this is too niche, something like February for her. Maybe that's a bit too, because I guess you want the word girl somewhere in there, or even human rights. But I think the hashtag is, I think the idea is very strong. The hashtag is not something that, you can't build on, you can't brainstorm around. I saw there was a campaign, and it was around child marriage, and it was very successful. And I'm just thinking about how you can lean into a particular example like this. But there was people would write something on their hand as to why they are standing against child marriage or children being married and child brides. And I'm just wondering, obviously, given that, especially, every single woman in the world has been a girl one day, and there are so many girls, whether there is room for participation globally, like putting out a call and asking people to literally do a one-liner. And it can be something as, in my opinion, like as straightforward as, I call for Girls' Human Rights Day because, something, everyone is going to have their own personal, very, maybe very, just very personal connection to why they would want that day. And I think it's compiling that in a digital campaign, and definitely a petition. I see a petition working very, very well for something like this, and having a lot of votes, a lot of signatures, and perhaps a series of online videos. Maybe even starting with one, why the need is there. I mean, you explained it so well. One just being why we need a Girls' Human Rights Day, so and so and so and so. And then, having people and their own personal testimonies, talking about, especially young girls, we need to hear their voices. The future is there, so we need them to shape what the world looks like, what this day looks like for them. I think it's a brilliant campaign, and obviously you have my full support, whatever I can do. So yeah, I think there's a big gap in terms of that day missing. There's also, I guess, that generational gap, having that recognition in human rights. Because I know we have Human Rights Day as a general day, but I think, everything that we know in our work, the importance of girls' participation, girls' voices being heard, girls' stories being championed, and just giving girls all the resources they need to shape their futures, to have autonomy, to make their decisions, and to exercise their voices. This is perfect. So yeah, it sounds amazing. It sounds really amazing. And I would perhaps also think about the UN, if there's room to collaborate with the UN in terms of, why this is so important. I can see that being a strong collaboration for sure.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, we have the questions, Maya and Zoe.
Okay, so I saw also, sorry, the first one was Vanessa. She said, I can't talk right now. One challenge I have for me was specifying exactly what I wanted the outcome of the campaign to be, beyond simply raising awareness, and knowledge without effective action is sometimes not enough. That's a really good point, Vanessa. And I would agree with you. I think for me, the easiest way to think about the ask or the solution to the problem is literally as simple as, this is the problem and this is the solution. How can I put this solution into a digestible format for the audience? For example, this is going to be a very straightforward example. There are many potholes in the street where I live. That's the problem. The solution is the potholes get fixed. Who can fix the solution? Who can fix the potholes? The council, because they have the funding, they have the money. And who can put pressure on the council to change that? Myself, because I'm affected, and everyone who lives on the street. So it's really simplifying it. What's the problem? Who does it affect? What's the solution? Who can bring the solution? And how you can bridge all those things together. I think we can sometimes have a tendency to almost complicate the solution, but the solution can simply be, once I've raised that awareness, I want everybody to donate to a run I'm doing in aid of cancer research, or cancer awareness. So just really simplify the ask. How can it help the people affected, whatever the problem is? And that can be a small solution. So in the case of, for example, breast cancer, if you are passionate about raising awareness about breast cancer, your ask doesn't need to be as big as, I need to make sure that every person affected by breast cancer is supported. Even if you say, I want to try and raise money for the 5 people living in my town affected by breast cancer, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a run. I'm going to get sponsored. I'll raise that money and I'll donate it to breast cancer research. So just kind of zoom in, and I think you'll find your answer there. I hope that's helpful, Vanessa. The other question was, it's also worth mentioning that natural disasters are a huge factor in making girls and boys more vulnerable to human trafficking. Yes, absolutely. Really, really good point. A lot of these issues massively intersect. And unfortunately, when we think about natural disasters, when we think about climate change, the impacts are usually but also boys usually goes up when these issues rise. So that's a really, really good point. Zoe said, how much time were you able to dedicate to your campaigns during the week? Did you have a full-time, part-time job during the time you run a campaign? That's a good question, Zoe. I'm going to be honest with you. My campaign, because it was coming from a place of lived experience and it was very personal to me, I dedicated a lot of time to it. There was a point in my campaign where I was 8 months and I would still be working. I would still be, bopping down to Parliament and having meetings. It was really important for me. And then I had my son and I was still very much in the midst of my campaign. I think the thing is with campaigning, you can really think that I need to just give it all my time, all my energy. But it's really important to have that steady pace, because with issues like humanitarian issues, violations, you can easily burn out if all you do is campaign, 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 campaign. You want to take care of yourself. You want to make sure that you're giving yourself breaks, that you are detaching, because these topics can be heavy, especially if we're talking about human rights issues. They can be quite difficult, and they can affect you emotionally, physically, mentally. So although I gave it a lot of time, I was very mindful of stepping back, taking time out. And sometimes when you spend too much on your campaign, it's hard to zoom out and think. There are times you just need to disconnect and then come back to it with a fresh mind, a fresh set of eyes, and say, right, okay, let's go again, let's brainstorm again. Now I've had a few days off. Otherwise, you just end up in a loop and you just think. It becomes hard to see the wider picture. And I always had a full-time job while I was campaigning. And even now I have my son, I have my job, and then I campaign whenever I see something that really speaks to me. Whether it's baby formula, it's abortion, homelessness, and that's the other thing I wanted to say about campaigning. You can be passionate about several campaigns, and you can lend your voice in different ways, and also see that even just retweeting something, resharing something is an act of advocacy in itself, because you're exposing other people to it, you are sharing that content, and you're helping to amplify the message. So sometimes the little acts are actually really big, and really help the puzzle keep moving. I think that's all the questions. Thanks, Vanessa. Also, on the last page, I think I put, not on the last page, sorry, there is one more page, this one, if any of you wanted to take a picture of, which was the advocacy toolkit. This I just like really, really summarized. But on the final page, I wrote my email address and my social media. If anybody wants to get in touch, if you have questions, if you are running a campaign and just thinking, I just need someone to look at this, just to give me their thoughts, their opinions, what's what can be improved, or what's my strength, etc. I'm always more than happy to lend my ear, to lend my support. So feel free to reach out on social media or even just by email. I see two other questions, which I think we have time. If I would make an FGM campaign, I think I would like to achieve multiple goals, such as making people aware that FGM is to create a safe sharing platform and to train teachers and youth workers how to identify and report FGM while promoting local helplines. That sounds like an amazing initiative. Actually, awareness, and especially training professionals, frontline professionals who are always around children, who are always around girls, is critical actually in making sure that FGM doesn't happen. The cases of FGM where we've had criminal convictions have come from schools, so it's a very important place. Sounds like a very strong campaign. Just if you are thinking about it, my best advice would be just go for it, even if it helps a few people. Vanessa said, just another question. Do you sometimes find it difficult to be vulnerable? I would like to get involved in advocacy work because it's important. Strangers quite wanting. Thank you for sharing that, Vanessa. I completely understand that. And yes, I definitely do and have found it through my journey at different points more difficult to be vulnerable. And I think that's really important actually in terms of when we are campaigning from a lived experience perspective or working with those with lived experience. Sorry, my internet said it was unstable. It's very important to make sure that we listen to our bodies. If something feels difficult in the moment, it might just be that it's something that you can come back to later. In the very beginning of my campaigning journey, I found it extremely difficult to be vulnerable. I found it very difficult to share my personal experiences, to talk about my family upbringing, to talk about being a child and having experienced abuse, but especially having the right support. For me, that was therapy, emotional support. That really helped me to make sure that I'm doing the things that I need to do to take care of myself in order to keep up my campaigning. And just because it might feel difficult and daunting right now, it might not always feel like that. So listen to that. Listen to your body, listen to what doesn't feel right. And who knows, maybe in years to come, doing more of this work, you might feel more comfortable. But don't ever feel pressured to have to share. If you feel like there are topics that you relate to, that you feel affected by, but you want to campaign on and you don't necessarily want to say this is from lived experience, that's completely fine. It's still very strong, it's still very impactful. And if you ever do want to, or if the time is right, then you can share personally. And there is always means of sharing anonymously, which I think is a great way. Again, in digital advocacy, you can always share things in an anonymous way, and work with, let's say, other organizations or other campaigners and talk about lived experience with keeping your personal identity to yourself and anonymous. So there's ways you can definitely share different ways, but Don't ever feel like you have to do anything or share anything you don't want to. Always lean into what feels right for you when it comes to this type of work. Just do what feels right, do what feels comfortable, and it will all fall into place. But thank you for asking the question. It's really, really important.
Okay. I think it was a good session, and thank you so much to everyone for the questions, and thank you to Paisy for, wow, the lived experience. I think it's always the best on running a campaign and being so successful in achieving that. Personally, I can imagine that you have learned a lot in that process. Thank you for your insights, for your responses to our participants, for your expertise. I hope everyone had a very good session, like they learned something, and thank you on behalf of the Girls Human Rights Hub team as well for your insights for the Make February Girls Human Rights Month campaign. We will not let you go in any capacity. So thank you to everyone for spending this afternoon with us. We'll see you again next Tuesday. Thank you, Paisy.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for your participation. As ever, I am always open to supporting anything you do, so please do reach out, and good luck with everything that you guys do. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you and to be able to share my learnings with you guys. So good luck with everything you do, and let me know if I can support in any way. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. For everyone else so that they submitted their campaigns for Laura's session, those have been sent to her, and we might do a networking session on the end. So keep a hold of the emails for more details. Thank you for your contributions, and again, have a good day. Thank you.